Richard, and forget to shop Merch with a Perp on whygoproject.com. That's whygoproject.com/merch-with-a-perp. Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Trauma Translator Live. I'm Lauren Friedman, your host, also known as Not Another Healing Asshole. And today I'm really excited to welcome Matt Fogarty to the podcast. But before we do that, I just want to share a little bit of updates on our end. I know that last week I had referenced the rebrand and what we're doing. I also had a migraine last week. It was a crazy day. It was a crazy week. But I had a breakthrough of magnum proportions. So stay tuned for that. And I will be dropping the new episode, the first episode of the Me IRL pod on YouTube tomorrow. And stay tuned for that because we all need to figure out how to me IRL. And one of the ways we do that is through nervous system literacy. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit today on the podcast. But also, I just want to remind you that if you want to support or you find any of these tools useful, you could buy the Camuso Shift in my link above and any of the products behind me, whether it's Equip protein bars, 20 grams of real grass-fed protein, or electrolytes morning routine. I always want to call it Morning Dew because there's another company that has breath spray called Morning Dew. But morning routine electrolytes, only 3 ingredients, and it's natural and it'll keep you sane, regulated, and your body in a place of safety. And that's all we really need. So without further ado, let's welcome Matt Fogarty to the show.
Hey, Lauren.
Hey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, excited to be on. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you. I mean, I met the backstory is the reason I'm here is because of you, which is crazy. It's really full circle, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And remember, you came on my show. What was that? 4 or 5 months ago now? I don't remember exactly. Yeah. So 6 months. Wow. Time.
Yeah. Time flies when you're having fun, right? Yeah. So tell us a little bit, tell everyone a little bit about yourself, what you do, your show, and love to hear a little bit about you.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Matt Fogarty. I am the founder of Cherry Willow Apparel. Those are my 2 kittens fighting in the background, Ace and Autumn. But at Cherry Willow Apparel, we are a nonprofit apparel organization, and we focus on homelessness awareness and advocacy and education. And then we also work with over 70 partners to help them use apparel as a fundraising tool, but then also as a marketing and branding tool. So I host a live stream, every month called Apparel with Purpose, where we bring on, different guests that are out there making a positive impact in their community. And that was how we originally got connected with Lauren. She was a guest on the show. And so really excited to be able to be on the Trauma Translator. As the experience of being homeless is traumatic, and a lot of people don't view it that way. So whenever I talk about homelessness, I always try to talk about it through the lens of trauma, because most people have experienced some form of trauma, even if they haven't had the situation of being homeless or being close to homeless. Everyone can relate to trauma. So I really appreciate the work that you do, Lauren, and being able to help people deregulate their nervous systems and just become a healthier version of themselves.
No, thank you. And that's why I was so excited when you and I first met. We just totally vibed because you have apparel with purpose. I have merch with a perp, also purpose. I had mentioned on my podcast that I just recorded. It's really hard to record a podcast by yourself, honestly, especially as me, that I could just I recorded one yesterday for 2 hours that I'm not going to edit. I need someone to edit it. And so we'll get there in time. But I'm going to be updating all my merch with a perp. The new website is unmeirl and without the u.com, and it's going to be a few SKUs. We're going to start small. We're not going to boil the ocean anymore. It's really hard to human, and like you said, trauma is something most people experience. It's actually a human condition. It's actually the real definition of trauma. It's something that people don't want to hear. People don't like the word trauma. That's actually why I've rebranded away from Trauma Translator, believe it or not, because people don't like that word. People don't want to engage in a show that's about trauma. They're like, trauma isn't for me, but trauma is for everyone. Trauma is just stress that overwhelms our ability to cope and or contradicts our worldview. So when you think about homelessness, people also think that's not for me. But when we think about what's going on at a macro level in our economy, like someone like me very easily could become homeless. And I know I spoke about that on your show months ago when we were talking about the highly superior autobiographical memory. Like most people with this memory, which I've now learned is because of amygdala activation, because of not feeling safe in your body. Your body's always on high alert looking for threats. So it just remembers everything, whether you want it or not. And it becomes overwhelming, truly. Yeah. Most people like that, who haven't had the proper resources, who don't have a trauma-informed view, or who just aren't as lucky as I am, end up homeless. And I've faced a lot of hardship since we last spoke. Whereas my ex's family like tried to come after me legally, and then they wanted to like unhome me. And I'm like, no, I'm not moving. I ain't going nowhere. But like, that's the thing. Like we can't become homeless as a society. And when we think about job loss and there's an affordability crisis right now. Like it's not just for the people who are living paycheck to paycheck. Everybody feels it. It's in the gas prices. It's in the food we eat. So when you think about homelessness and the crisis, this isn't just for people on the street anymore. It's for you and me, right? PTSD is for you and me, and trauma is for everybody. So I love the work that you're doing. And I know that you just got back from an amazing mission. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So last week was our second Pedal for Progress bike ride. So last July was the very first ride I did from Sacramento to San Diego, which was 715 miles. And the reason we picked that route as the first ride was it allowed us to pass through 7 out of the 14 cities with the highest number of people experiencing homelessness in the country. And then we partnered with 7 nonprofits out in California to tell their story and, again, help increase visibility in the communities that they operate in. And, the goal is always to inspire people to take action. So last week I biked from Jacksonville down to Miami. We partnered with over a dozen different nonprofit and community-based organizations. And it was so cool getting to hear the different stories and all of the work that's being done in communities all across Florida. And we actually had a bike that was donated to us by the Honeypot Bicycle Collective, which was a nonprofit based in Jacksonville, that I rode all the way down to Miami. And then on the last day, I found someone experiencing homelessness. She was actually from Fort Wayne, Indiana, and had only been in Miami on the streets for about a month. And she could really use a bike. And it was because of a connection that she had made with another guy. His name was Pedro. I met him on the street, and he's like, I don't need a bike, but I know someone who could. And so, people experiencing homelessness, they rally around each other, and they have really strong communities. And that's, part of the way that they can support each other. And so it was a really cool experience to just get to meet some of those folks and to be able to provide a tangible benefit and help them at the end of the ride. Because advocacy, is extremely important, but it's also difficult to know like how many people you're reaching and how many people you're actually impacting. So being able to physically see the people that we were supporting was a really cool experience for us.
No, I mean, that's a beautiful thing. Like that whole ride is incredible because like you're actually able to put a face to the name, right? Like a lot of things are abstract in our society. We donate to causes that we don't even know if those monies are going to the right places, right? We have no idea where those monies go. Often they're really not. They're like just pocketed, right? So I think it's really beautiful. And it's funny when you first started the story with Sacramento to San Diego. I love California. I'm a Cali girl at heart. East Coast soul, West Coast hustle, or West Coast soul, East Coast hustle. But I literally was thinking, I was like, maybe you went down PCH. Like, no, you didn't. You weren't doing the scenic tour. You were actually trying to get into the communities. And Sacramento, I know, obviously it's the capital of California, but it's a really hard city to live in. And they've had a lot of devastation with wildfires, farmers. Like I'm very familiar with what's the topography of California. I've been keeping tabs on it for a while because I have been trying to move there for like over a decade, which I don't know if I'm doing ever. But at this point with what's going on in life. But like, that's really interesting because we know Sacramento, we know San Francisco. You don't hear as much about LA. You definitely don't hear as much about San Diego because San Diego does not want their name associated with homelessness, right? Diego is like the prize jewel, I think, of the East Coast. So that's really, really beautiful. I think of you every time I pass a homeless person in the city and I don't have a protein bar because I told you when I actually carry protein bars all the time. We talked about at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah.
But every time I see a homeless person, even before like obviously like just in my own walking, before I carried protein bars everywhere, I would just buy them food, right? I would go to Starbucks or just do something, because most people are actually hungry. And if they're not, that means that there's other problems, right? And it's not about judging people for what they're going to do or what they're not going to do with the money. Like, you can't control when you give somebody a gift if they're going to use it properly, right? Like, unless you're a crazy person. So like, most people are hungry and most people won't turn down a protein bar. But that's the thing about when people are homeless and they have no other support and no other help and they have no other place to go, they take their lives too. It's not just about being unhoused or whatever people want to call it these days. People also have a problem with the word suicide. I have to keep doing this button. And I'm like, we can't prevent it if we can't say the word. So it's the same thing with homelessness, right? If we can't say people are homeless, not unhoused, and we can't say unalive, what are we doing as a society? Why are we worried about vernacular when we're not worried about the actual problem? And the actual problem is nervous system literacy. People will make better decisions when their systems are regulated. They will have better support. They will have better communication. They're able to stay alive. My dad's suicide anniversary of when I found out was this past Saturday. And I had a major breakthrough of magnum proportions that I'm going to be talking about on my podcast that's going to be dropping tomorrow. But part of it was being able to connect with my parents and being able to find their guiding light in all of this, because it's really hard. And most people don't have those resources to get that connection. So when you're on the ground, what are you hearing from the people that you're helping? And like, how are you, besides biking and besides getting them, different things, what are you doing specifically to help them when you're in those environments? Because most people would be afraid to talk to homeless people.
Yeah. And so we do a few different things. So I always encourage people to, like, a nice thing that you can do is carry like little gift cards. Like, you could go to Dunkin' Donuts or Subway or somewhere that's fairly accessible, McDonald's. If you don't want to give cash, giving a $5-10 gift card is really helpful. And then, but studies have shown that giving people cash is actually the best way to help support them, because you're giving them the autonomy to use that for whatever they need, and that's a misconception I hear a lot around homelessness is, like, oh, they're homeless because they're an addict or because that they, have mental health issues, when oftentimes those issues stem from the experience of being homeless. It's really difficult to not know where your next meal is coming from, to have to sleep in a tent and worry about all of your possessions getting swept away by, the city. And so these are challenges that people interact with every day. But one story comes to mind that when I was doing an interview with a gentleman who's been homeless for quite some time, he shared with me that he had a friend who was considering suicide, and they were really close to, pulling the trigger on it, if you will. And one person just stopped and talked to them and, was just kind to them, just had a conversation, didn't give them any money or any food. But in his words, that completely changed their entire aspect, and that person didn't end up going through a suicide. And so, that one act of kindness, that one act of humanity, just stopping, taking the time to introduce yourself to someone that's on the street, recognizing that that's a person in your community, that action alone saved a life. And, that's something that we're all capable of. We don't all have money, or always have food or resources to be able to provide for people, but we all can take a moment to just recognize the humanity in each other and just be empathetic towards that person. And so, again, that's something that each of us can do. And it just takes a little bit of thought and maybe a little bit of courage, right, to approach someone that you're comfortable with. But I think what you'll find is when you have conversations with folks, like, that they're no different than you or I. And so that's always what I encourage people to do, is just stop and introduce yourself. It may end up saving a life.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. Like as I said, last week, I was really feeling very hopeless. I feel like I've done so many things in my life and like, I just keep hitting the same walls. And it's really frustrating when you keep asking people for help your whole life and no one can help you. And I was really like, I've never been suicidal, but I also was like, I'm just sick of experiencing this existence, and it does become really hopeless. And the only, like, obviously speaking to someone, showing someone compassion, showing someone that they are human, right? Like, we're all human. And I agree with that, but it's really the nervous system literacy that saves lives, because what you're talking about fundamentally like, when we talk about being homeless, not having support, we don't know where we're going to stay. We don't know if the only things that we own are pillows or our blankets that have been donated or we've been able to steal, whatever that is, that tent is going to be swept away. Like, that creates unsafe conditions in our body, and we need to create conditions of safety in order to move forward in a healthy dynamic. And you're right, like it doesn't even have to be someone in your community. Like I live in New York City. It's a big city, right? There's homeless people everywhere, and there's certain streets that have more than others. And I was walking recently, like to a lunch, and on my way there, I realized I don't think I had a protein bar with me because I didn't like refill it in my bag, or I changed bags, whatever was going on. And I literally said to the guy, I was like, hey, I'm really sorry. Like I would give you a protein bar, but I just don't have one. And he looked at me and he was like, oh, thank you. Thank you for noticing me. Thank you for actually acknowledging that I exist. Now, did that save his life? I'm pretty sure it didn't. But at the very least, it showed him that there is like someone that gives an F about him. And like, that's all we need. We need one person to show compassion. Like even someone like me, I'm not homeless, but I need one person to give an F about me so that I'm not just being attacked, like, you know, for my whole life through being weaponized, the legal system being weaponized against me, and, you know, corporations not having any responsibility, and the government not giving a about the fact that I can't pay my bills or I haven't had employment, even though I want to work, and I just got my health insurance taken away. So like, there's a lot of things that are happening in our society that are creating conditions of unsafe environments for us as humanity, as humans in like our existence in humanity. And tuning in from South Africa, thank you so much for joining us. And the thing is that we need to be able to regulate our nervous systems in real time to make better decisions, to get through those really hard moments. That's the answer to everything. And you're right, cash is king. Cash has always been king. But the thing about cash is that most people have these very antiquated thought processes that like, oh, they're going to spend it on drugs or alcohol. What are you spending your money on? Seriously. Are you spending it on OnlyFans? Are you spending it to gamble on those sites where you could bet on anything? You know, like, who's judging you on your money? Like no one, like if someone's homeless on the street, give them, if you have cash, great. I never have cash. You can't Venmo them, right? So like, that's a really good idea about the tips, about those gift cards. I also probably wouldn't do that. The protein bars are always good. People always, and they're good tasting too. Like I think I told you that there was a man on the train in 2023 that people were just like moving away from him. He was like 45 degrees hunched over, and it was right around Thanksgiving. And I saw him and I was like, hey, listen, I don't have any money. And he was going around begging people. And I was like, hey, listen, I have no money, bro, but I have a really good protein bar. He's like, I'm not going to like this. I'm never going to eat this. And I was like, I swear, it tastes really good. And he was like, wow, this tastes like a candy bar. I love it. And he was hungry and he devoured it. And like, this man hadn't eaten in so long. And there's like a tent city there, right? Like we know where he lives. Like, and every time I have like a blanket or something extra, I always think like I should bring it to someone homeless, but I never do, because it's like, where do I find the people? You know what I mean? So I think that's also part of the problem in society is like, how do we get to those endpoints quickly? Like if I were to gather a bunch of things that I want to donate to a homeless community, how would I do that?
Yeah, so I suggest for anyone that's trying to get more consistently involved, to just research organizations that are based in your community, because they already have the relationships and they have the trust with the people. I just encourage people when they're coming across folks to at least acknowledge them and introduce yourself. But there's also folks that may be in a moment of mental health crisis, and it might not be the most safe thing to approach them without training. And so that's why like partnering with an organization that is already doing outreach in your community, or partnering with a shelter or a food bank or people that are already serving these individuals, that's a great way to start, because every community is going to have different needs. Like in Florida, they don't need winter coats, right? But, in Chicago, where I'm at, like that's a real thing where people need winter coats and they need blankets and stuff, especially, in the fall. And so like that's, every community is going to have their own needs, but, things like water is always great to have. And people will always take water, and especially down in Florida, I would go around and like pass out water to folks. And and that's what I was doing the last day, where I just like, hey, you need a water, and then I'd ask, like tell them a little bit about my story, what I'm doing. And that's how I met Pedro, and that's how I met Chloe to give her the bike. So that's really a good way to do it. If you're just have some extra supplies, like you said, the protein bars, and just give it to them and give them a moment of your time. That's more than what a lot of people do. And that's one of our phrases that I have is humanize, not otherize. And when we otherize these individuals, and that's not just homelessness. Like, that's how a lot of problems in society are created. We focus on what divides us. And there's a really well-funded think tank called the Heritage Foundation, and they are pushing right-wing policies. They've pushed for criminalization. So, like, the Grant Pass ruling in 2024, allowing municipalities to criminalize homelessness, was a huge step backwards. And the reason that they're doing that is because if you can make it so being homeless is illegal, now you can imprison people, and then you can force them to work. And so, like, it's a modern form of indentured servitude. And that is really, like, these prison systems are very profitable as well. And so, like, they cost money to build and maintain, but the population of people in there are controlled. Where if we invested that same amount of money in generating affordable housing, now you actually have that safety, right? That physical safety and that psychological safety. So you have a foundation that you can build from. Where when you're on the street, you don't have that.
Well, that's the other thing, by the way. The Heritage Foundation is trying to ruin our whole society. Like, they literally are trying to take away rights from everybody. Like, when you said that, I was like, I pray to God that you're not in favor of them, because you said really well funded, and I was like, oh. No. I was like, we're not going to promote them on the show. But yes, I agree with you. And that's the thing. They're behind literally what's going on at a macro level. Why nobody cares that. And that the real problem is, it's not that those people don't want to work. It's that no one will hire them. No one will hire me. In fact, I got a message today. This is how I woke up this morning at 5 a.m. I got a message it was a text message from Ruth's Chris. And it said, hey, here's an update on your employment. What did it say? Here's an update on your employment application, which I've been applying for jobs since I lost my job in June of 23, when I really should have really applied for disability, because I really was very sick, and I didn't know how sick I was until I got better. I knew how sick I was, but I didn't know like how much better I could get. I had to rebuild my nervous system from the ground up. I had to rebuild capacity, and I should have really done that. I should have taken out a line of credit. Like, I have a lot of good advice for entrepreneurs, because we're thrown into entrepreneurship lots of times. Like, I lost my job 6 times with my whole team, and nobody will hire me because of myriad reasons there. Not to mention that I've been having these issues way before what's been going on with AI. I've been having these issues since 2011. This is called capitalism in America. So when you think about criminalizing, right, and then forcing people into indentured servitude, like you're talking about, it's not that those people don't want to work. I want to work anywhere. I've been begging for jobs. I also got declined from that job, just so you know. But the guy laughed at me. Like, he literally laughed at me in person. Do you know how many times people laugh at me? And it's really, really hard when you're begging people for jobs. I have 20 years of corporate experience at the biggest companies in the world, and they laugh at me because they're like, you haven't done this in 20 years. 5 people are interviewing for the same job. And I'm like, cool. I haven't even applied for this in years. And I was like, oh, maybe they'll hire me. It's right by where I live. It would be so great. I can make good money. I worked for their parent company 20 years ago. And so it's not that these people don't want to work. They can't get jobs. I can't get a job. So what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to just live on the street? My ex-husband has never been able to make money. His dad was stealing from us for the last 20 years, and nobody has any obligations. There's no laws to protect me. And so that's literally, like, people can slip into homelessness really easily. And I'm really quite afraid of that, quite honestly. Like, I really am. I'm afraid that one day my ex is just going to stop paying, and I don't know how I'm going to live. And I was the one supporting us. I was the one providing insurance. And when you're homeless and you're getting criminally charged for being homeless, that's not good. One good stat that I heard, though, since you and I last chatted, because I do work with a lot of veteran communities, and obviously veteran community have historically been homeless, which now we know why. It's not because they can't provide for themselves. It's because they have unprocessed complex trauma that disrupts their ability to function in society. And that's the ultimate problem with most of this population. Most of the population that's underserved, or how did you say it? Otherized?
Yeah, otherized.
Yeah, otherized. That's really interesting, because it's true. Most of those populations all have to have immense generational complex trauma, because trauma, like you said, it's epigenetic. It lives in our genes. It becomes pronounced through environmental factors. So it's not just what's happening in this lifetime, it's what's happened in previous generations. So these people likely came from dysfunction. They came from environments that were not safe, or they were exposed to these things. And I did hear, though, that the veteran community has had a lower amount of homelessness at this point. So that's a beautiful thing, right?
Yeah. The VA has done good work in the last few years to have a real focus on getting veterans off the street. And to your earlier point, like actually one of the stats that I'll share anytime I have an opportunity to speak on homelessness is 40 to 60% of people that are homeless actually have jobs. And so it's an affordability crisis. When you look at the census.gov data, over 40% of households in the United States are cost burdened, which means they're spending more than 30% of their income on housing. And there's a really good book called There Is No Place for Us, which is Working and Homeless in America. And the author studied 5 different families and shadowed them essentially for years to write this book so that you could see how challenging it is to just navigate the system. And, even if people have like a Section 8 or a housing voucher, it's really challenging to be able to find a landlord that will accept that. And that's something that they're left to navigate on their own largely. And that's even, if they're fortunate enough to get that, because that's a lottery system in a lot of ways just to get on the list to get a voucher. So there are so many levels and layers of like bureaucracy that make it really challenging even to utilize the resources that exist. And, these are people that are working sometimes 2-3 jobs and still can't afford to pay rent in their communities. And so that's not the fault of those individuals. That's the fault of the people that profit off of their labor and off of the housing. And housing is a human right, and housing is also healthcare. Like when you see the results of not having housing, it drastically puts a not only a humanitarian strain on that individual, but it puts an economic strain on those communities. Because if someone goes to, the emergency room that's homeless and doesn't have insurance, that cost falls back on the American taxpayers, where it would be much more economical to actually just provide housing. There's a really famous story by Malcolm Gladwell called $1 Million Murray. And I think it was written in like 2007 or 2008. And it was based in Reno, Nevada. And there was an individual named Murray who was homeless. And he was, a really nice person. Maybe he was dealing with some alcohol or some addiction issues at different times, but would find himself in the emergency room on a semi-regular basis. Even if he just didn't have a place to stay that night, he would go to the hospital so he had somewhere warm to sleep. They tabulated the amount of spend that the state had on him over the course of the year, and it was $1 million. Yeah. And it would have been so much cheaper to, again, use that resource to provide housing, and then also surrounding with support systems and community, because housing only does not fix the problem. It's housing first to be able to have that safe foundation to build from, and then surrounding with the support system, surrounding with community of people, so that they don't go back to the environments that maybe that they were in and making some of these decisions that weren't good for them.
So the thing is about everything you're talking about can be solved with nervous system literacy. Actually, nervous system literacy is what solves the healthcare crisis. It actually reduces healthcare premiums. It actually reduces people's illnesses. It can help people get housing and that's actually like the panacea for society. Like housing is one component of it, but nervous system literacy is how we solve everything. It's really like the underlying, like I have a lot of stats that when I speak about this as well, it's literally this exactly what you're talking about, but that the underlying issue with that $1 million, and when you think about taxpayer money, that taxpayer money is already being allotted towards the war in other countries and building a ballroom, and apparently the January 6ers who tried to overthrow the government. So we need to also stop talking about what our taxpayer dollars are going towards as otherizing them, because let's also talk about what's actually happening in our government and how we could solve for extraneous absurd spends that aren't helping society at all and are only enriching the oligarchs of this country. And it is really scary. So that's really what's going on. And if we were able to teach those people, right, that are homeless, that don't have places to go, some nervous system literacy, it would help them engage better. It wouldn't force them into those illnesses. My dad was really unwell, and he actually did grow up in the projects, in East New York. And I agree with you. It's really hard to take advantage of those programs. I don't know how he got himself out of there. I never got to have that conversation with him because he and I didn't have that long on earth together. But there was a lot of questions I had. I don't understand how you could take yourself from the projects on welfare to upper middle class America. He got into Harvard on a dare. These people are brilliant, but they don't have the literacy. We have a literacy crisis in this country, but it's not about education or reading. It's about literacy in our bodies. And how do we solve that? Because that's how we reduce illness. That's how we reverse conditions. That's how we stop racking up high cost medical expenses for the whole world. And that's how we ultimately end homelessness. But to your point, if people don't feel safe, right, they don't have a place to stay, they're going to try to find it in any way possible. And those places that are warm year round that you were just mentioning, there's other things that come along with that. Like also dehydration is really like, it was 96 degrees here yesterday in New York in May. How much hotter is it going to get in other places, right? Like, and we need to think about like the impact of what's happening in society and how we can help each other in those moments. So I think what you're doing is beautiful. And as you engage in these conversations, I would love to interject some nervous system literacy into those, because that's ultimately how we solve this problem. That's how we solve every problem in society. Because it's not about what's being spent, right? I actually don't care about that $1 million for that man. I'd rather go to him than go to the January Sixers or go to a ballroom. Who needs that? Why are we doing this? Why are we enriching these people that are already rich? Like, why are we not bringing it? Like, I'm sick of it. I'm really sick of it. And we're not gonna solve. We can't boil the ocean, right? But we could at the very least educate and aware. And I agree with you. And it's not always safe to talk to a homeless person. Like, it's just not. Sometimes they are really dealing with very serious mental health conditions that also can be reversed through nervous system literacy. Like, I'm not saying like you're not going to be schizophrenic and you won't need to take your medicine, but those attributes and characteristics can lessen over time. And we don't have to otherize people. I love that term. I think that that's such a beautiful term. Thank you for sharing that term with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think it comes back to how our society is structured, where, you know, from a healthcare standpoint, most things are, you know, Band-Aids, if you will, where it's like, okay,
everything's a Band-Aid. Yes.
It's symptomatic. You're feeling these symptoms, take this medicine to alleviate those symptoms, but then it doesn't get to the cause of what, you know, and that's where, to your point, is we're not listening to our bodies, right? The pain and some of these other indicators are meant to be listened to so that you can adjust your behaviors and you can, you know, actually take the steps to not have that pain. Whereas, you know, our society, because it's profitable, is deemed to like, no, you're going to keep taking this medicine because that's going to make the pain go away. And then that's going to keep letting you do whatever it was that caused those symptoms to arise in the first place.
But also, it's not just because it's profitable. It's also because people are not educated. Like, doctors are not educated in this. Mental health professionals are not educated in this. Like, I was in therapy since I was 5. Both of my parents were therapists and nobody understood the mind-body connection. Like, I've gone to so many doctors that didn't understand this. So unless you have a holistic view of wellness and you really understand the nervous system, most people are specialized, like you said, right? So then you're getting passed between someone who's an endocrinologist, someone who's a cardiologist, someone who's a whatever, right? And then they all have conflicting views, right? Because they only know their specialty. So that's why I look at it also like from a holistic lens, like from a media standpoint. We need to look at things from a holistic third-party media agnostic lens. That's how I compare it to advertising and technology. And I have talk tracks on that. But I agree with you that these aren't like, we're not getting the root cause because we weren't aware of what the root cause is. And we need more education for our society around the root cause. Because when this has happened to multiple friends, when their mom was dying in the hospital, they had multiple doctors with multiple specialties that were like, hey, we need to do this and we need to do this, but they conflict with each other. And people just end up dying because we don't have a holistic view. So when you work with like an integrative physician or someone who is trauma informed, who has a third party view, you could then get all the proper help. Because it's kind of like this was actually like an analogy or whatever that was used in when I used to sell third party media agnostic JavaScript tags. I never used it, but it's like a power strip where like, hey, you could work with the right professional to regulate your nervous system and help your mental health and also help your physical health and help everything part of your life. Because when that gets stabilized, you could change the world. But until you have a regulated nervous system, you can't do anything. So yeah, it's a really important part of this conversation of how we're going to have a better society. How do we live together in society, right? That's ultimately what you're trying to do. And I love your mission. For the folks at home who want to get more involved, how can they join? How can they support your mission? How can they, purchase, donate, get involved? What would they do at home?
Yeah, absolutely. So for anyone watching that's being introduced to Cherry Willow for the first time, our website is cherrywillowapparel.com. So we have our retail line, which helps us be able to fund our team and be able to continue to do the work that we're doing. And then we have collections that we built out for 70 different partners So those are actually a fundraiser for those partners. So the bulk of the profits go towards our nonprofit partners, 80% actually, and that funds their mission. So, if there is a mission that really pulls on your heartstrings, like we actually finished the Pedal for Progress ride in Florida at NAMI Walk in Miami. And NAMI Walks, like that, they are a national organization that organize these mental health walks and try to address the stigma that still exists, crazily enough, around mental health. And most people, like to your point, Lauren, even if they do understand that like there is a problem, they don't necessarily have the courage to voice that because we haven't created a safe space for people to be vulnerable and to ask for that help. And that's that's
they don't also know where to go because nobody like I went to doctors my whole life and they just told me to lose more weight. That wasn't my problem. Like my lifestyle wasn't my problem. My lifestyle was my problem, but it was because I didn't know how to stop. I didn't know how to listen to my body. So yeah, I agree with you. I also, no offense, like the way we don't solve homelessness through walks. We don't solve suicide through walks. That's not what we do. We need to solve it through nervous system literacy. We need to get into those communities and train people and educate them how to be in their bodies. That's what I'm trying to do. Next time you do one of your pedal things, that's what I want to do. I want to come there and help people be in their bodies so that they can learn how to have a better life and they can get out of these situations. Even when like the police are trying to arrest them, they could get into way more trouble if they're not regulated, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think a lot of problems stem from like a loss of self.
It's safety.
Whether that be mental, well, it's because people don't always love themselves, and like that's.
Well, how can you when your whole world has been ripped apart? That's what I've been struggling with. I had to find ways to find love for myself when I've lost everything, except for my home at this point. Not good, like truly.
Yeah, and then like even like people, like I talk a lot about light. That there's light within each of us that we are meant to shine on the world. But a lot of people's light, whatever their dreams are, a lot of people may be discouraged from pursuing them because maybe it's not realistic to be able to provide a living for yourself, in our society. But that's, like if that's your soul and that's your purpose and that's why you're here and you're not pursuing that or doing it for yourself, that can cause a diffraction and where you're really feeling badly. And then you're just masking it with all of these other things. It could be with alcohol and drugs. It could be food. It could be even exercise. Like any of these different things mask the inner work that we all need to be doing.
Well, it's self-abandonment because we can't deal with what's going on. And it's also protection. That's what I learned the most is like we are self-abandoning ourselves. Like I used to think I worked out 14 hours a week and I still was almost 300 pounds multiple times. I threw myself into my job. What do I have now? Nothing. I have zero. No one will even, I get laughed out of jobs. So like we need to also have realistic conversations as a society. Like, because I agree with you, everyone does have a light, everyone has a purpose, but we also need to live like in a reality of like, hey, this is how I'm going to provide for myself. This is how I'm going to use my purpose. And sometimes they can intersect and sometimes they can't, but we still need to be able to find that's a realistic view. We still need to be able to find a way out. And the only way out is through nervous system literacy. And that's how we solve this problem. So for the people at home, where can they find you? The website, I know you said it before. I'm sorry I derailed that conversation. This is a really personal issue for me because I'm scared and like everyone's scared. And you're right. Like, I think the number that you're talking about of I forget how you phrased it, but of 40% of people's
cost burden households. Yeah.
I think that's way higher at this point. Like this is just an insane life that we're all living in, and we need to be able to regulate our nervous systems. And when you don't have the resources, when you don't have the support, when you go to doctors that aren't well informed, aren't nervous system literate, you're going to keep getting those same results. That's why our society is always sick. So if people want different results, they have to do different things, right? That's what I had to do. I had to do everything different. And when you start doing other things different, now it's not that easy when you're living on the street and you have nobody to talk to. And it's very easy to like become schizophrenic after that. Like when you're just speaking to yourself and people run away from you, especially in New York City. No one wants to walk, next to someone who's like in a sheet on the side of the street. It's scary. Like it really is, because you don't know what's going on with that person. You don't even know if they're alive or dead. And like, it is scary. So we do need to have more compassion. We need to stop otherizing. But we also need to remember this could happen closer to home than you think. And we need to take precautions as a society to really help each other. And even if it's just to remind each other, let's get back into our bodies. Let's figure out a way to connect with ourselves so we can connect with others with a higher power. That's why I call it the art and science of connection, nervous system literacy for all. So as we end this, where can people find you? Where can they donate? Where can they get involved? I know you said it before, but let's say it again for everybody else.
Yeah. So the website is cherrywillowapparel.com. So you can shop all of our different collections there, as well as donate to the different causes. We also have some of the content that we've produced from Pedal for Progress on the site, other media interviews, the links to my live shows that you can watch. And then if you want to follow me personally, my accounts are Fog, F-O-G, the number 2, and then Fogue. And that's kind of a story about my own personal journey of enlightenment. And, I was in a fog for most of my life and really just was doing as little as possible to get by. And I was pretty smart and was able to get good grades and, you still get scholarships and things like that. But 3 years ago is really when I realized that I wasn't pursuing like the highest version of myself. And so that's when I really found who I was. But it came through, like self-abandonment and really tearing down a lot that I thought made me who I was. But it ended up in a really beautiful way, helping me to find myself and my purpose. And so, I'm really grateful for that. And so that started some of the content that I'll share is like the different philosophy, psychology, mindset type of training that I went through, and try to help others, be able to positively reframe experiences that they are holding on to that are maybe holding them back, and look at them in a different way and actually use it as a way to empower them towards making them the best version of themselves. So
yeah, no, it's wonderful. You and I have a lot in common. That's literally like what I do as well. Like that's all I want to do is help reframe, right? The things that cause us pain can be reframed and they can then become powerful for us, right? They become powerful tools. And when you think about a fog, that's like really a freeze response, right? Being stuck in that freeze state and not having any control, any agency over your life, feeling trapped. So yeah, this is really how we liberate ourselves from ourselves, right? So it's a beautiful thing. Keep spreading your mission. I'm so excited to have you on, and I can't wait to chat with you again, hopefully on my other pod. So tune in next week. We're going to be having, we might have a guest one of the next 2 weeks. We're only going to have 2 more episodes of this Trauma Translator Live because nobody likes the word trauma. And we're going to then shift to Me IRL pod on YouTube and other streaming platforms. So stay tuned. Thank you so much for joining. And Matt, keep on spreading the gospel. Have a great rest of your day, y'all. To all of the jewelry that I have behind me, I'm always wearing the Camuso shift necklace. And the reason why is that it actually is an anxiety antidote. It helps you shift into calm in real time. And it's all about the exhale. So what I like to do is do a 4-4-8 breath. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, and 8 seconds on the exhale. And the exhale is where the magic happens. It actually helps reduce your heart rate. It reduces blood pressure in real time. And it helps you breathe into calm. So let's do it together. Inhale for 4. It just feels so good. This is truly my favorite. From the beach to the boardroom, you could wear it everywhere.